Hi, I'm Amy Carroll. Welcome to Art in Indiana. I'm here at this Harrison Center for the Arts with Justin Vining in his studio, and we're getting ready to talk to Justin. He's an up-and-coming artist at the Speedway Centre for the Arts, and up-and-coming is a great way to describe him. He is a really up-and-coming, talented artist that a lot of people have their eyes on all around the state, the region probably. And Justin, thanks so much for having us at the studio.
Well, thanks for coming. Thanks for being here.
So the Harrison Center is, of course, exciting to be in. It's one of those gems of Indianapolis with lots of different art, a lot of eclectic, trendy, modern, but yet there's always a hint of tradition, especially in your artwork.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things we had a conversation about. You kind of started out as a modern artist, or what would you call yourself?
I would say whimsical landscapes.
Whimsical landscapes.
Yeah, that's what I started out painting, and I've transitioned and evolved into a traditional plein air landscape painter.
Very well. I wouldn't always say you're traditional. You've got a little still edge. I like that about that.
Well, thanks.
A lot of great colors, a lot of different nuances that you put in there that wouldn't necessarily be considered always traditional.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
How did you come about being an artist?
So, always had a passion for art. And so when I was younger and trying to figure out what it was I was going to do for the rest of my life, I was like, man, what jobs are cool? And I was like, oh, my art teacher has a cool job. So that was the track I went on. I went to Purdue undergrad, and then I majored in art and art education, minor in art history. And then when I graduated, I was an elementary school art teacher, and I taught elementary school art for 3 years. And that time period very much informed my early work. So when you look at a lot of my older paintings, they're really bright, bold, colorful.
Do you think it was because you were looking at that view of the child and that kind of elementary educational
I mean, their unencumbered
aspect of it?
imaginations is super inspiring. And just being surrounded by that, I really think it showed in my work.
And then I know that there's been hints of you like having gone to law school or become a lawyer or something along those lines.
Yes.
We all find ourselves in different ways.
So
what kind of led you from that? What made you stop being an educationer?
After 3 years, or kind of at that 3-year point, being a teacher, I was open-minded to career changes, and I wasn't quite sure what that meant or what that would be. My little brother, he was graduating undergrad, and he's like, "Hey, I think I'm going to go to law school." And it's a whole long story for a different day, but I was like, you know what, let's do it. And so we applied to law schools all over the Midwest, and we just wanted to go together. And there's a couple schools that we both got into, and one of them was pretty close to where we grew up, and so it seemed like the natural fit. So we went to Valparaiso University, and I went to law school. Well, what happened was my first semester of law school, I needed a break from the books, and coming in as a non-traditional student, I mean, I was gunning. I was really motivated and there for a singular purpose of being super successful. So I was in the library a ton, and just needing an escape from the books as final approach. That first semester, one night I just picked up a paintbrush and just sort of started painting for fun, just as an outlet, just to not be reading about civil procedure for a night. And so that painting, and I think it was really strong, much stronger than anything I'd done. And I think that was because I wasn't really making it for any other purpose, didn't really think too much about it. And so that kind of ignited a little spark. So I did a couple more paintings, and I sold them all really quickly. And
did you sell them at a gallery? Did you sell them
fellow
through
law
people you
students.
knew?
Yeah,
I was going to say.
I can think of everyone that has all those paintings, where they're at, and they're all over the country now, which is really cool.
That is really cool.
Some of those early buyers have still continued to be some of my biggest advocates and supporters. So that's been really fun. But another long story short, I ended up, through my time at law school, being surrounded by business-minded people, and they really taught me how to build and drive a business forward. And so I started selling in 2008, so my second year of law school, online. And so there's a map of my studio, all these pins, and everyone asks me, oh, is this where you travel to? And I'm like, this is where all my paintings are.
Oh,
and
wow.
So I sold actively online from 2008 really aggressively through 2012.
Were you still going to law school at this time?
So-
Were you just when did you kind of say, I'm not going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be an artist?
Well, our third year of law school, I was just like, man, I really might be able to give this a legitimate shot as a career. And so my brother and I, at that point, decided to put a plan in place to make that happen. So we graduated past the bar. We opened up a law firm downtown Warsaw, Indiana. And the plan at that point, I was going to continue painting and driving that revenue forward, and he was going to build the firm. And it's interesting because at that point, even though I was loving what I was doing, I still never considered it my long-term career path. It was, I felt like it was...
I think we all fight that. I think we all go,
Well,
really? We're going to do this for our whole profession? Is that really what's going to do it?
Well, I think
don't know.
society just sort of beats this starving artist stereotype into people that it just seems so unrealistic and unachievable that even though I was making decent money, I mean, it's not lawyer money. Right. At that point, it wasn't. So you're just kind of like...
You're not going to get super
right,
rich
well,
super fast. Yeah.
So, and not that it's about money, but I just wasn't... I thought maybe my life could find this balance. Well, I ended up getting a job offer out of the blue in Indianapolis. Didn't apply, and it was... I ended up talking through with my brother. I took the job, so that's what brought me back to Indianapolis. And after 7 months of being back in the real world, being an online business, and not painting, not being active, the internet is a very fickle, forgettable place. And so people didn't really, my business was tanking. So I felt the longer I stayed in the real world, the farther away this would become. And I felt that I would never be in a better position to absorb the financial risk of just giving this a shot. And so after 7 months, I just quit that job and I've never looked back. And that was 6 years ago.
That's fantastically brave.
Thanks.
And I think that's something that's such an important thing to talk about, because I think all artists, emerging, professional, however long you've been doing it, it doesn't matter. We all look at that and go, can we really exist and obtain a lifestyle that we want to be able to have and be artists? And it's so true what you just said. The more you become involved in that professional world and that reality of it, the less you're involved in that reality of your art and the love of the passion of it. And that's great that you're able to acknowledge that so freely.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I felt like I was at this, since I was a student when I was building it, that flexible schedule of a student really allowed for me to clerk 20 hours a week, because I still, all through law school, I'm like, well, I'm going to go practice law, so I had to know what I was doing, but still continued to drive this forward. But in the real world, working long hours, I mean, it just really didn't lend itself. I mean, when I got home, I didn't want to paint. I wasn't motivated, and this really I feel like it's an all or nothing career. You really have to be in it. And I mean, I can say this, 6 years after, painting every day for the most part, I mean, I'm motivated as I've ever been. And so I'm excited about my future as I ever have been. And I don't know, I think I'm painting as good as I ever have been. And yeah.
That's exciting to see.
Thanks.
It really is. And I think one of the things that you're touching upon that is so important to me, especially I think at an art center like the Speedway Centre for the Arts, we get so many young people come through, or at an art show. I'm sure you've been asked it by somebody that's studying art in college or wherever, and they go, what should I know about being an artist? Should I do this? Should I do this? And it's always about some kind of creativeness. And my thing I always say is, which I think you've done so expertly, is you'll always find a way to be creative. You may not have the skills to be that great business person that is required in the art world.
Right.
And what you're saying is that aspect of that business life that you led is what, and I definitely see it in just the small amount of interaction I've had with you, is how professionally and quickly and you take those opportunities and you make the most of them.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and I think that's, absolutely what you have to do. And I feel lucky to have had the background that I have, because it's crazy. Had I gone to art school, I think, would I be farther along in, the objective technical skill of creating and paintings? Yeah, I probably would have been. But law school was actually probably one of the best things I ever could have done to put me in a position to do this.
At the same time, I think that some of the freedom and the joy of watching you as an artist is that you don't really look for those barriers because you don't always know that they're there. And so you just kind of choose, I'm going to be this, and I'm going to be the whimsical painter, I'm going to be the traditional painter, or you just go with what leads you. And isn't that what we're all supposed to be doing?
Totally. Recently, as my career is progressing forward, I'm learning a lot more about the broader art world as a whole, and how to sort of break into that national
sometimes
level.
It's better not to know.
Oh, well, I was just going to say that. I think
don't look for it.
I think one of the best assets I had was being so naive. I think had I known how competitive and how difficult it is to sort of, because I'm sustainable and it's such a good lifestyle now. I obviously want to go to the next level, but that barrier, in some ways, it's never felt so close. And in other ways, I had no idea how big that gap was. And I think had I known that 6 years ago, I don't know if I would have done or maybe I would have done things different. I don't know. Who knows what would have happened, but I feel lucky to be in the position now that, I'm giving this a legitimate run. So we'll see what happens.
With no end in sight.
Yeah.
Hands-free, flying down the hill.
That's totally true.
That's great. What are some of the things that you find most inspirational? The exciting thing for us in Speedway is that you're going to mainly focus on painting some of Speedway.
Right.
And I think that's so exciting. That's the dream of what anybody at an art gallery wants, is for someone to say, hey, I want to come and paint your town and show it in your gallery. That's exactly what we want for Speedway. So what were some of the things that you found inspirational about us?
At Speedway?
Sure.
Oh, obviously I'm very familiar with the track and the area and all the history from an outsider's perspective. So I think just really going in and absorbing the culture of Speedway, because it really does, even though it's kind of right down the street, it feels like a different place than Indianapolis with its own. Yeah, and I'm really excited to go explore, learn, and be a part of that for a month.
Just as the same as Mass Ave is different than Fountain Square, Speedway, Beech Grove, any little pocket is just such. And I think that Speedway is definitely got this very strong exterior to it that you really have to dig in there to find the real stuff. That it's really a wonderful, wonderful place. But I think it's because it's always been such an independent town, separated off, that it kind of always maintained that its own identity so easily.
Yeah.
So, well, cool. We're so excited to have you do this. So talk about, you said you're a plein air painter. That's one of the main things you identify yourself as. Kind of tell everyone, what is a plein air painter? What do you consider those earmarks to be to say, I'm a plein air painter?
The commitment to go outside and paint every day on location, or most days. Or, well, I guess there's a lot of plein air painters that just, I go outside and paint on location. That's what I do. And so when I talk about being sort of in Speedway, I will be out there with my easel and my paints and my brushes, my backpack, just walking around exploring, and I gotta say, you're a diehard plein air painter. Like, it is like 2 degrees outside. He's got on his Facebook, painting outside on the bridge today somewhere. I'm like, really? Not just outside, on the bridge. And it's 2 degrees and it's icy and whatever. One of the coolest days this year was one of the best paintings. I had 2 pairs of gloves on, and the painting turned out rock solid, and I couldn't have been more thrilled. What did you paint? We were out at Eagle Creek. I was out with 4 other painters, it was a good day, and it just goes to show. But part of the reason I like it is I guess this is really hard to describe, but the experience of observational painting. So it's so much different than painting from a photograph. The photograph, it could be stale, or it's finite. It is what it is there. Whereas, when you're really observing in person, you can exploit, and you kind of mentioned this about my colors earlier, maybe I see like a little bit of purple, even though that, like, you know, it's like road, so it's asphalt, so I know it's sort of like this bluish black, but like the light might just be hitting it, or maybe it's by some green building and it's throwing this crazy color. And so when you're in there experiencing it, you can really, I don't know, to me it just makes for a really enjoyable creating experience.
Usually you paint rather quickly, I think. Is that correct?
That's true.
And your paintings, you're going to paint smaller paintings for Speedway.
So the majority of the show will be 9x12s and 12x16s. And the 9x12s take on average between 2 and 3 hours, and the 12x16s maybe 3 to 4. So.
When you paint larger pieces, or when you bring something back to the studio and you kind of futz with it, like you've got a piece back here, do you feel more pressure? Do you feel less at ease when that kind of thing is going on?
Well, especially on some of these bigger ones, when it starts to have what I call good bones, where I'm just like, man, this thing is coming together. You know, you don't want to screw it up. So the farther you go into a painting, there's certain things, especially creating with like a looser style, you kind of want some of those happenstance moments and some of that beautiful brushwork and some of that, you know, I don't want to get in too far and overwork things. So you want to have this fresh look. And so the more time I spend on paintings, like the one behind us, you know, I really like how it is right now. But I mean, there is a little bit of fear, you know.
You had a goal and you're like, well, I like where it is. Do I keep going?
Totally.
When do you stop? That's always the question, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, this painting's a great example of, you know, when do I stop? Because I feel like I see things that I could push this a little bit more, but then that might look bad, you know. It's sort of just like, how do you know
I think when they get bigger, somehow you kind of go, oh, I can't just rip that off the wall, put another canvas up, and keep moving. You know, like, you can't just toss it over your shoulder and move on.
Totally, because on the bigger ones, I mean, I have hours and hours and hours. So, I mean, if I mess it up, I'm losing money.
But don't you kind of like that? Don't you kind of like that when it gets hard, you believe in yourself a little bit more, that you can push through it and make it right, make it be what you want it to be?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Make it beyond what you kind of were settling for before.
And I think that's why I like the plein air painting, because you know, having an hour into a 2-hour painting, I feel a lot more liberated to take a lot more of those risks. And so I know I can actually think of specific paintings that I've painted over the last month where I have a particular goal in mind before I even start. You know, no, I'm not going to use this type of brush, or I'm only going to use this, or I'm going to limit myself on this color. And so, I mean, it's kind of.
So for each painting, sometimes you have that goal?
Oh, totally.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
I could pull paintings out and show you.
That I was going to go with less of this color, or more of that color,
not going to
more
add
of a shadow, something
titanium
like that.
white until the end, or I'm not going to grab my mop brush, because I have become a heavy mop brush user to really, and so some paintings I go in, I'm like, I'm not going to touch my mop brush until the very end, because it forces me to build it and think it differently.
Interesting. That's cool. That's very neat. What do you think, we've talked a lot about the joy of painting and being able to explore that whole world of it, but what do you think are some of the hardest challenges that you have as an artist, especially as an artist in Indianapolis currently?
Well, something that jumps out immediately is, as a early career artist, especially one whose style has changed so much. You know, the last year is really the only year I've worked in oils and gone this more traditional route. So I mean, I spent 5 years full time and 7 to 8 years building a brand that was really recognizable and pretty distinct. So I mean, it's scary to kind of move away from what I have a history of selling and taking a risk and going in a direction that, you know, will people buy this from me?
Have you found that some of your buyers from the beginning have grown with you as you've grown?
Totally.
That's wonderful.
Well, and because I think a lot of those people are invested in, I mean, I think they like me, and they really, and I think they're supportive of, you know, wherever I go. Whereas some people, I feel like they just liked that particular style, and when I paint that again, if I do, or, you know, whatever the future holds, you know, I think they'll come back. But because I mean, and I get it, you know, paintings that look more traditional and some of them in big gold ornate frames, I mean, that's not for everyone. And a lot of people who buy art, I mean, there's lots of there's several different reasons people buy art, but a lot of it is home decor. I mean, this stuff just doesn't go with people's stuff. And just like my old stuff that's super bright, bold, colorful, I mean, that might not look great in someone's home. So
True. Often in the art world, I think especially in Indianapolis, there's such a kind of a chasm between modern or introspective art and traditional art. And here you've gone from everywhere in that spectrum. Do you necessarily feel like you're going in one direction intently and kind of sticking to that, or do you feel like you're moving between those? The freedom there is amazing to watch and inspiring.
A year ago when I shifted to oil painting.
Has it only been a year?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
wow.
Part of the shift, one, I just wanted to start working oils, and the first body of work I made was kind of in my older styles vein. But what I realized by building that show in oils is I really didn't know anything about oil painting. And so I wanted to return to the fundamentals a bit. So last May, I started plein air painting, not with the intent to do it long term, but with the intent to do it short term as an exercise to really learn how this paint works. Because being a watercolorist and an acrylic painter, you build those paintings totally different than I build my paintings now. And so what unexpectedly
one more
happened,
challenge, that you wanted to kind of defeat.
I didn't expect falling in love with it. And so that's kind of what has happened. I thought I would go in as this exercise in this more fundamentally sound understanding of how to make oil paintings would inform my future studio work. What happened was I kept painting outside. I juried into Penrod with plein air paintings. I built Penrod out of plein air paintings, and that was in September, and then I just kept painting all through the fall outside. And so I thought that I would somehow combine my older work with the plein air, and I did some experimental pieces that just, they weren't doing it for me. And I'm going to show them just because I think it's important to show that evolution.
That is good.
And maybe that will happen someday in the future. I know in the short term right now, I'm not ready for that. And I mentioned it earlier, but I am more fulfilled as a creator as I've ever been. And that to me is motivating. And so that's what keeps me going outside. I don't know.
I love seeing how this very right-brained side of you feeds and makes you grow as this left creative side. It's almost two parts of you that makes you go, let me stop, think through what I want to do, what avenues do I want to take. Whereas so many of us are just like, I'm going to float along, see what happens. Oh, this looks good today. And I think that's very inspiring to see and, kind of experience with you as you change and grow as an artist and see that happening right here. What are some of the things that kind of pull you or draw you in when you're kind of out there in the field? And plein air means kind of going to the field, and I think it's French term, correct?
Yeah.
And it's plein.
Yes.
Not like plain. But it is just the word we use as artists for the person that goes out in the field and actually paints while they're there. You kind of go out in the field, or you're going out on a street or whatever it is, and you're kind of looking for some inspiration. And what are the things that kind of catch your eye or drag you to go, ooh, that's it. That's what I'm going to paint.
Initially, I'm looking for good design. And so I'm looking for, and it's kind of hard to describe, but obviously something that is super interesting to look at. And that can come in a variety of ways, whether that's the way light is hitting something, casting a shadow across the building, whether it's like a very cliche would be like a river running through, and then, it goes back to this focal point. So you have this really beautiful 1-point perspective, just looking for something that I can really build a strong design around. And once I have that, then it's, exploiting and pushing and pulling. And a lot of times when I'm out there, I omit telephone poles, or I add things, or I move things. And
is it kind of the thing that you want to discover more that kind of makes you go, I want to kind of get in there and play with that one thing? Maybe if it's something small, or it could be the bigger picture, or whatever it happens
sometimes
to be.
Finding the locations is as enjoyable as just out there hiking around and exploring. I mean, I've seen so much of Indianapolis that I never knew existed just because I'm carrying around empty canvases.
So where are your favorite spots?
So my One of my favorite spots in the city to paint, there's a park, an indie park at 16th Street and Fall Creek. It's in between us. It's in between the Harrison Center and Speedway. And so as you're driving across 16th Street heading towards Speedway from us, if you look south towards downtown, there's a big island on the Fall Creek. And when the water is low, you can get out on there. And so here you are in the middle of Fall Creek. You are in the middle of Indianapolis. And I mean, granted, you hear the city, but you don't see a soul. And so I feel like I am as far away in wilderness as I potentially possibly could be, and I'm right smack in in the middle of Indianapolis. And it's really close to where I live, really close to my studio, and I love it. It's really, really peaceful. So that's one. But finding places like that, I never would have found that if I wasn't outside painting.
Well, we're happy to have you come out in May and do this fabulous still to be created gallery show in our kind of a white box in Speedway Centre for the Arts. We always have exhibitors. We kind of are a different kind of art center. We're trying something a little bit different than what everybody else is doing. We're kind of a co-op in the back and more of an exhibit gallery in the front, where we use the artists in the back, or actually we use you guys that come in to kind of teach the emerging artists in the back how to become more like you. They may take a tidbit away from what you may inspire them to do, or it could be something that, they could just emulate you. I don't know, but whatever they end up doing. But the whole point of the Speedway Center for the Arts is to have these gallery artists like you come in that have had experience, have done shows before, and kind of show and shine right there in this white box. It's not too huge. We don't have a lot of opportunities in Marion County to kind of have your own solo show. And this is just one of those great examples we try to create. You'll be there in May and June, but we love the fact that you're going to be there and showing kind of your perspective on Speedway, which is what we're looking forward to. All the pieces are going to be smaller.
Yeah, for the most part.
No, nothing too big unless you get super inspired by something.
Maybe there'll be a showstopper centerpiece, but for the most part, when I work on location, they are smaller works. We
always, what we do often as a council, we go out and we scout for artists, and we kind of go, who do we want to ask? We don't have that many opportunities and slots available in our gallery. And I had seen you initially at Broad Ripple and thought, oh, I'd like to have him. And you weren't even quite into all the traditionalism yet. And I still liked it, which is unusual because I love traditionalism. But I was like, ooh, it's still really cool. And then you actually came up with the idea to paint Speedway. And we can't have, like I said earlier, we can't have asked for anything better than that. It's always the thing that artists and galleries want to have happen.
Well, thanks. I'm excited about it.
Good.
I can't wait to get in and get the paintings going.
And I think everybody in Speedway will be excited about it too. We can't thank you enough for joining us today and letting us sit down in here in your studio at the Harrison Center for the Arts. And we can't wait for you to come see Justin's art at the Speedway Center for the Arts. He'll start hanging it on May 1st, and it will be up May through June. And then his open house will be May 26th, so we hope you join us then.